Hey guys, thanks for watching my channel today. Today I want to talk about when the bite dies and what happens to the bass. The fact that they don't disappear, they just reposition. If you fish long enough like I have, and you probably have, you've lived this moment. You're catching them pretty good, pretty steady, going along that same area that you and your buddy been fishing for years. Uh, Kind of the same bait, same stretch, same rhythm. Then all of a sudden, nothing. All of a sudden, you look at your rod like it betrayed you. You check your line, you look up at the wind, you wonder about the moon, you blame your fishing partner. That's always a good one. But here's the truth: bass didn't leave, they just simply moved. But let's talk about, where do they go when the bite dies? And how do you find them? Well, they kind of slide off the edge. Most of the time, when the bite shuts down in shallow water, bass don't run a mile down the lake. They simply slide. They might move from side to side. They might move shallower, they might move deeper, but 9 times out of 10, they're going to move from the bank to the first drop off or the first change in depth. If there's no change, if it's gradual, they may simply look for some type of underwater structure. It might be an underground stump, rock, could be almost anything. It's just a stopping point. They might move to the outside of a grass flat. They might move from, the front of the dock to the that's in shallow water to the deepest edge of the dock. They might move from a pad field into deeper water, or they might move out of the pads altogether. But especially here in Florida, when the sun gets high, those fish don't vanish. Uh, they case out the nearest deeper, more protected area. At 77, I don't panic anymore. I pick up a worm or a jig, and a lot of times I'll just back off the area that I'm fishing. 9 times out of 10, they're still there. They're still willing to bite. And one of the things I've found that works extremely well is just Carolina rig. Something I can hop along on the bottom out there in deeper water where there doesn't appear to be a lot of structure, but the water's deeper, they feel a little safer. And now that the sun's up, they've not necessarily gotten shade, but they've gotten a little protection from that hot sun. Uh, if they move in other areas, they might be moving again just to get out of the sun, uh, because it's not that they mind the sun. They just find that being in the shade gives them a little bit more control over, finding food, which is what they're in there for in the first place. So in a bright sun, they might get real tight under the dock posts, alongside the dock posts, in thick hydrilla. They might be on the dark side of a laydown, and they might be under a pontoon boat. People don't realize when they go along the shoreline how often something like a pontoon boat is the perfect place for bass to feel shielded somewhat from the hot sun, but also to use as an ambush point. And here's something else that anglers often miss. When the bite dies on one side of a dock, it might still be alive on the shady corner. Sometimes bass will simply move around the dock, same dock, just a different angle. And it's all due to the sun and shade. Some anglers learn this, that it's not always about a new area. Sometimes it just simply requires a different angle and a different cast. Sometimes they'll suspend. Now, I'm not a big believer in suspended bass, but when they suspend, it can be pretty humbling. At that point, the fish stop relating to the bottom. They hang out where the bait is, usually just under the bait. And if If you're watching your electronics, they're easy to spot. But if you're not watching your electronics, you'll swear they left the lake. They didn't. They're still there. They just quit being bottom fish. And that's when you need to go to them. That's when you need to use a jerk bait, a swim bait, a spoon, a slow count fluke, or even counting down a Senko. Put that bait out there and, let it fall. A swim bait, they're going to have to come up for. I mean, in a lot of cases, a swim bait and a jerk bait, if you're running them near the top, you're forcing the fish to come up, which is fine. In some cases, they will, because they're looking up, they're watching that school of bait fish. But when they're not willing to come up, that spoon, slow count fluke, letting it kind of fall to the bottom, or even a Senko can be just the ticket to get them to bite and to save the day. But sometimes they just stop. Sometimes the window just closes. Sometimes the bite dies because they've already eaten. Maybe they went on a feeding spree earlier, just before you got there. Bass are different than bluegill. Bass don't feed all day. They feed in windows of opportunity. It might be that morning flurry. It might be that mid-morning, early afternoon. It might be an evening rush to get dinner before nightfall. At our age, again, I've learned to be patient. Instead of running 20 miles looking for the fish, for the fish to show themselves, I just slow down. I change retrieves, maybe wait 30 minutes, stay in the same area. I know the fish are there. I've had the bite die so many times, only to have it turn back on without ever moving the boat, because I had the patience to wait. And sometimes that's the correct process. Sometimes the fish will move due to pressure. Tournament day is a great example. You get a weekend crowd, tournament boats, jet skis, water skiers. Fish know that they're there, and they can feel that. And they'll often reposition themselves because of it. A lot of times they'll go to thicker cover. They'll go to deeper water. And they'll go to secondary areas that are not as obvious as their primary. On places like Lake Istapoca, they don't leave the grass. They just move from the obvious outside edge to the irregular inside seam. Pressure doesn't make bass disappear. It makes them selective. When I was 30, I'd fire up the outboard when the bite died. Now, I ask one question. If I were a bass, what just changed? Was it the light? The wind? Maybe it was the boat traffic. Maybe it was the bait movement. Am I still seeing, schools of bait fish? Or did they just disappear? Maybe it was my presentation speed. Whatever it was, the fish stopped reacting. Something changed. And when the bite dies, it's almost always because something changed before we even noticed it. So what do I do then? When the bite shuts off, I guess I can back out and try fishing slightly deeper. I can slow down my retrieve. I can downsize my bait. I can change my casting angle. And sometimes maybe I eat a sandwich and just give it 15 or 20 minutes to reset. And then, if nothing else works, then maybe it's time to leave. And I leave with a reason, not a frustration. See, the older I get, the more I realize bass don't turn off. They just simply reposition. And if you understand that, truly understand it, the bite never really dies. You just have to find it again. And I'm going to tell you just real quickly a little story that happened to me probably 20, 25 years ago. I was was actually fishing a bass tournament with my son, and we had fished hard all morning. We had caught, our limit, but they weren't big fish. And by noon, it was so hot. The fish just shut off. We hadn't caught a fish maybe in an hour or so, and I was ready to give it up. We had we had a respectable amount of fish, a respectable weight, but nothing close to what it would take to win. And I knew it, and my son knew it. And I told him, I said, let's just call it a day and head in. And as we headed back in towards the area where the weigh-in was going to be, my son mentioned, he said, as long as we're here, we might as well stick around and see the weigh-in. He said, it's only going to be another hour or two. And I said, I like weigh-ins. I like to see the fish that are being caught, even if I'm not the one that caught them. And so I agreed with him. And right at the opening of the area that we had to drive through to get back to where the tournament would be, where the weigh-in would be, there was a long stretch of reeds. And these reeds, bulrushes, whatever you want to call them, they stretched for maybe, I don't know, 500, 800 feet. And it was pretty steady. And they were in about 3 feet of water. And I told my son, I said, let's just fish here. We'll just kind of stay in this area, and then we'll have a short trip to get back in. And we started flipping those reeds. And as we did, suddenly my son caught one. It was a pretty good fish, big enough that we could call one of the fish that we had in the live well. And we went down a little bit farther, and I missed one. And we went down a little bit farther, and I caught one. Again, a good-sized fish, maybe 4 pounds, able to call again. And this went on all the way along this entire pass of reeds until we got to the end. And I didn't want to take off and go somewhere else. So I thought, well, we missed a couple fish. Let's just turn around and go back through the same area, which we did. And guess what? We caught another one, and we missed a couple more. And we got to the end, and we did the same thing. We just turned around, and we went back through that same area. And the point of all this is we still didn't win the tournament, although we had a much more respectable bag of fish. I think we were around 18 pounds. But what I learned from that, and I've used it to my advantage over the years, fish will repopulate. They will reset. And if I had to guess, I would say that the bass were coming in and going out of this area all day long. And obviously there was food there. There were bait fish. There was something that attracted them. Not to mention the fact it was a great hiding area, great ambush point. And so we could have gone back and forth in this same stretch probably all day long and picked up 1 or 2 fish every time we went through the area. As it was, we had a great time, and those last couple hours of the tournament were much more fun than the rest of the tournament combined. The rest of the hours that we spent hunting all over the lake. And the amazing thing is they had stopped biting. We had stopped catching any fish in the other area that we had fished. And it was probably 90 degrees when we got to this new area. And I had given up pretty much all hope of catching any fish. And here they were all this time in this one spot, more than ready, to take our baits, more than ready to hit. They could have cared less that it was 90 degrees. And you know what? We didn't care either. Anyway, that's my story. And anytime you run into this, don't give up. And there's always fish that are willing to strike, willing to hit, willing to feed somewhere on the lake. And if not, stay in the spot that they like, in a spot that that you've caught fish. Because if they were there once, they'll be there again. And sometimes it just takes a little bit of patience on your part to wait them out. So again, thank you for watching my channel today. I hope you enjoyed that. And that little story, and you know, maybe you've got one of your own. If you do, leave it in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed the video, you know, give me a thumbs up. Thanks for watching today, and good fishing to you. I hope you have a chance to get out on the water.